Hey everybody, welcome to this video, and this is going to just go over how to set up and use Visual Studio, the IDE, not Visual Studio Code, but Visual Studio IDE for Windows computers to be able to compile, debug, and run C++ code. It's a very nice IDE that's available on Windows. There is a Mac version of Visual Studio, but I believe the issue with that is that you're not able to get C++ on Visual Studio for Mac. Luckily for Mac, you have an IDE called CLion, and I believe there's another video provided that goes over CLion. This video will mostly talk about specifically Visual Studio, the IDE. So let's go ahead and begin with the installation process. So let's go ahead and begin by just running the browser of your choice. I'm going to go ahead and just run Google Chrome. And of course, you just Google Visual Studio. So not Visual Studio Code, but Visual Studio, the IDE. And you click on this website right here. And you want to install Visual Studio. So of course, here's the Mac version, but we're going to stick to the Windows version. And we're going to avoid Visual Studio Code, but Visual Studio. So you would go ahead and click on Community 2022. Community is a free version, and it's going to be able to do everything you need to be able to run your basic C++ code in Visual Studio. So once you have it installed, of course, you run Visual Studio, but it doesn't have all the compilers and debuggers needed. So you have to go ahead and launch Visual Studio Installer next. Let's go ahead and click on or find this one. So you want to type Visual Studio Installer. So at the very bottom, you have your search bar. You want to go ahead and type Visual Studio, but you want to run Visual Studio Installer. This is going to allow you to add additional packages or workflows to Visual Studio. Let's click on that. So anyway, so I guess I have Visual Studio 2019 also installed, but I'm not going to worry about that. Let's go to, so you should probably have just this bar right here, which is Visual Studio Community 2022. So go to Modify, and here you can select which package you want to work with. So right over here, Desktop Development C++. So you want to go ahead and you want to be able to click on this, and of course you'd have to then install while downloading. So you click on that next, and it may take a little while to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video right now so mine will be able to install, and I'm going to go ahead and sort of continue once everything is set up. So eventually you should have the C++ workflow or C++ package installed on Visual Studio. Before I cut the video, I forgot to mention that when you want to install the packages, you have two options. You can either do download first and install, or install while downloading. I believe either way is going to be just fine. I did download and then install, but either way it's okay. So eventually you would have the Visual C++ package installed, and now you're ready to begin working on projects in Visual Studio. So now I have Visual Studio in my, I guess you can say taskbar. I have it on my taskbar already pinned to it. Now you would have to maybe just go to your start menu and select and find Visual Studio, but I have it in my taskbar. So I'm going to go ahead and just click on it and run Visual Studio. So at the very beginning, you want to create your project. Now, before you do this, sometimes you might actually have it where Visual Studio is going to ask you to sign in or create a sign-in. You can use any email you like. So it can be a Hotmail account, but I believe you can use your Gmail as well. But just create a login if it does ask. And of course, it gives you the option to choose dark theme, light theme, and so forth. So I already have mine already set up like that, but just a disclaimer, you might have to deal with that first. Once you have that all ready to go, you will see this screen right here, and you want to create a new project. So you want to select C++ as your language, and you have all these different project types. You want to find empty project. Now for you, it might be somewhere, it could be any random spot, but you want to locate and search and find this empty project. So C++ language, empty project. Let's click next. Now for project name, you want to maybe call it assignment 1, assignment 2, and so forth. So I'm going to maybe just call this assignment 0, I'm going to call it for right now. So, I mean, you may have different assignment names, so just give it the correct assignment, whichever one you're working on. And then the location. You want to put it into a location, to a folder that you commonly use, so it's easy to locate this. So I guess in my case, I like to put stuff into my desktop. Not always, but I guess this case, desktop is a good spot, I guess, to put your content. So I already have it set up already, but I'm going to just do it from scratch once again. So I'm going to right click on my desktop, locate new, and then new folder. To create a new folder, I'm going to call this maybe CS135 projects, or I guess that's a good enough name. Okay, so we have to be able to tell Visual Studio where the location of this folder is. If you right click on the folder and click Select Properties, right here it gives you location. So it's my C drive, users, Jimmy, OneDrive, desktop. So whenever you see this slash symbol, that really means a folder. So you have C drive, then it should be a folder called users in the C drive. It should be a folder called Jimmy underscore, or in your case, probably it's not going to be Jimmy. It's going to be whatever username you have on your Windows machine. And then OneDrive folder. And it's OneDrive because my desktop is set up where it's actually my OneDrive desktop. Maybe for you, it might just be your username and then desktop, not OneDrive in front of it. But anyway, just when you go to your desktop, you right click, create a folder. You want to know the location of this folder. So here's the location right there. I'm going to use this as my guide to help me. So I'm going to go ahead and set up the location. So when you run Visual Studio, it might have it at some random location somewhere. You want to make sure it's in a location that you can find on your computer. So you want to click on these 3 dots right there and hit browse. Now, you might be in some random directory somewhere, so you want to go and just click on this PC. So any Windows machine will have that. And then local disk. So I have actually a D drive where I guess I save all my games on that D drive. My C drive is where I have most of my, I guess, work-related stuff, or I guess stuff for class and so forth. So click on local disk. That's going to be your C drive. Double click on that. So now we're in our C drive. So in our C drive, you want to find a file called users, which I see right there. Double click on that. Then your username, so mine is Jimmy underscore. Then in this case, this folder I have right here is in my OneDrive. So let's search for OneDrive. And then from OneDrive, let's go ahead and search for a folder called desktop, which is right there. So now our folder is called CS135 projects. So I'm going to click on that and hit select folder. So now we can see here, maybe I actually could even highlight this and paste it there, but I just went ahead and did it the long way. But I guess you could actually control and copy this, and maybe you can be able to just actually just remove this and then control V to paste this. That actually could work as well. So that might be actually an easier way to do this because really this is my location. So I guess either way works as long as you have it where the location is going to be pointing to this folder. Now, of course, I have to, I'll just go back and do this the old-fashioned way again. So I'm going to just do just this PC just to be safe. I'll just go with this approach. And then we can, of course, begin. So once I'm here, click on the folder, select folder. Okay, so now I have the project file and our project name is valid and I have the location. Let's hit create. And it's going to create this assignment 0 within the CS135 projects folder that I have created right there. So now here we have empty projects. You want to go ahead and create and add a file to this. So if you look at the this right side of Visual Studio, you have a sort of source files. So you want to go ahead and right click on that and then hover over to add and then new item. And then over here, you want to go to Visual C++ and you want to click on C++ file. Now, as you remember, for code grade, typically you want to have main.cpp. So I'm going to go ahead and at the very bottom of name, call this main.cpp. So it's going to add this file to my project. Click add. And in your source files, you can see you have main.cpp. So here we can begin to write code. Now let's go ahead and I'm going to minimize this for a second. I'm going to open up this folder I have created right here. We can see here that we have this assignment 0 folder. I'm going to click on assignment 0 again. And there is your main.cpp. So as you modify main.cpp in Visual Studio, it's going to modify this file right here. So this is going to be what you're going to drag and drop into CodeGrade, have CodeGrade verify your solution. Now again, this compiler on Visual Studio is not going to be the same compiler on CodeGrade, but under some extreme circumstances, it's going to work on CodeGrade. Now, there might be some cases where maybe it's not going to work on, it'll work on Visual Studio and it will not work on CodeGrade. That's under a very extreme circumstance. So for the most part, that will not be a problem. And usually the one major problem that could cause that to happen where it'll work on Visual Studio and not CodeGrade is if you don't manually initialize your variables. So that's a very simple thing. Just always make sure to initialize your variables at some default value, and that problem will never happen. But anyway, let's go ahead and open up or sort of now unminimize Visual Studio. So here we are. Here's our source file main. I'm going to, just like in class, let's include IO stream, and then have our using namespace standard, int main, just like in class, and of course, very important, return 0. So now let's go ahead and of course do our infamous hello world. You can't really have a CS or C++ tutorial without the initial infamous hello world. So just like in class, cout hello world and L. Now, of course, you could also have it where you can do a /n like that. Either way works, but I'll just to be simple, I'm just going to use endl, which is, I guess, looks nicer, but it doesn't matter. Either one, endl or /n, they'll both output a new line. Okay, so here's our initial program. So to run this, instead of doing g++ main.cpp and then /a.out, on Visual Studio, we have sort of these play buttons, you can think of it. So I guess as you expect, play will play and run your program. So I'm going to, there's two ways you can run this. You can run this either in debug mode or non-debug mode. So for now, let's go ahead and run this in non-debug mode. So this play button that's sort of filled with green is debug. This sort of empty arrow, empty play button is going to run it without debugging. Also, you can see right there, you can click on, you can click or type Control F5 to run this, but you also can just click right here on the play button. So I'm going to click right there. And there it is. It compiled, it ran, and I'll put hello world. So there we are. We have our infamous initial hello world. So let's go ahead and now just write some actual very basic code to do some input, output, some calculation. And also I'm going to show you how a debugger can also be used in Visual Studio. All right, so let's go ahead and now just begin our actual, I guess, first initial simple program. So in this program, I'm going to just ask the user to enter some amount of money in US dollars, and we're going to output the amount in the equivalent amount in euros and in British pounds. Let's go ahead and do that next. So the first we have to do is define a few variables. So let's go ahead and do that first. So I'm going to create a double variable, and I'll call this maybe USD for US dollars. And then double, I guess I'll say, British pounds. And then I'll say double euro. So here's one issue that could happen with Windows and Linux. So right here, these variables are all set up, USD, BP, and Euro, and these are initialized to be 0 automatically in Windows. In Visual Studio, it will initialize these variables to be 0 by default, but on Linux, it might not work that way. So just to be safe, you can, of course, just set all these variables to be 0, and that way they're set to 0 on Windows and on Linux. So, because sometimes we need to define variables in Linux, it's not going to automatically initialize them to 0, but this is going to force that. So I would just say, as a good habit in 135, when you define variables, just set them to be 0 right here on the fly, just like that, and therefore that possible problem that could happen where it works on Windows, not on Linux, is not going to happen because of this, because we will be careful and initialize our variables to all be 0. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and just prompt to the user, cout, enter US dollar amount, and I'm just going to just use our CN USD. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and compute the euro and the British pound amount. Now, of course, you could use constants for this, but this is a very preliminary video, so I'm not sure if you went over constants yet in class. So just to be safe, I'm just going to not use constants. I'm going to go ahead and just say euro equals 0.93 times US dollars. And then, of course, British pounds. It's going to be US, or I'm going to just be consistent, 0.79 multiplied by US dollars. So I just sort of looked these up, and I saw that was for 1 US dollar is 0.93 euros, and 1 US dollar is 0.79 pounds. So hopefully this is the correct calculation. But if I make a mistake here, I guess it's not really the big issue. We're just doing a simple calculation of converting. So if I made a mistake with my formulas here, well, I guess just pretend I did it correctly, but really we're just simply taking our amounts, our variable amounts, multiplying it by some value, and storing it into a variable. Just a simple exercise, which is doing some basic calculations in C++. So anyway, now, of course, for constants, you of course can have 0.93 and 0.79 defined as a constant above in main, but depending on how far you are in your CS class, I'll just leave that part out. So I'm going to now output to the screen. So I'm going to output USD equals, I'll just type in euros. I'll just like that. And so I'm just simply outputting to the screen the US dollar amount, and here's the equivalent euro amount. And I'm going to do one more for the British pounds. So USD, I'm going to output the actual contents of the variable. I'm not sure it's actually the correct sort of currency code, but I'm just going to go with that for right now, like this. So there we are. So pretty simple program. We're reading in some value, doing some simple calculations, and outputting the results. So let's go ahead and now just compile this. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this arrow at the very top, which is going to be this kind of hollowed out play button. And it loads up the terminal. So I'm going to go ahead and type in an amount. So I'm going to go ahead and maybe have $14.95. And I guess that's going to be the equivalent euro and British pound amount. So you can see that it just goes ahead and runs it all. So we're doing some command line based programming, but we're using this nice IDE Visual Studio. So that's just the basics of how it works. So all you would do is just simply write your code right here. And of course, whenever you can, of course, Control S to save, or you can do File, Save All, or Save. I guess I would always just do Save All, so it saves your entire project. But if you do run play, it's going to, of course, save automatically. So all you have to do is just that. So the next thing I want to go ahead and talk about is what if you close your program, you want to run this. Let's go ahead and just, so let's say you take a break and you turn your computer off, you close the Visual Studio, you want to be able to continue from this location or from this point, this situation in your code. Let's go ahead and talk about that next. So I just closed Visual Studio. So the first sort of simple way, actually it's not close, I have to close it first. So the first simple way to reload your project is to simply just run Visual Studio, whether you go to your start menu or if you have it pinned to your taskbar, you run Visual Studio. And of course, it will show your recent project. So this is going to be assignment 0 is your recent project. You want to open that. And then there's your project as it was before. Now, sometimes the problem that can happen is, oh, well, what if I don't have those recent projects shown when I open up Visual Studio? Another way is, of course, you know where your project file is. You want to go to where your folder is, where you have your projects. Double click on that, and there's your assignment 0 folder. So you want to click on this assignment 0.sln. Now, sometimes on Windows, you don't always have your extensions always enabled, but you want to be able to have that set up where you can look at the extensions. And to do this, let me see, you want to go to View, and you want to click on this File or File Name Extensions. You want to click on that because you want to always know the extensions of your file. It's a very good, very important to have that if you're a program. You want to know each file's extension, so that's what you would do on Windows 10, or I guess, I don't know if Windows 11 does this, but I have Windows 10, but you go to View, you want to click on this File Name Extensions. So you want to double click on this file right here, and that's going to, of course, open up, that's your project file. Visual Studio is going to open up your project, and it will load your main and all of your stuff that you had previously. So again, just to recap, when you go to your projects folder, you want to submit to code grade. You want to make sure you go to assignment 0, and this is going to be your main.cpp is going to be what's going to be submitted to code grade. So I have mine running where it's going to, actually I have it where I have my my .cpp files, my editor, what's it called? Sublime. So Sublime actually is my editor I use for .cpp files. So of course, if you open it like this, then open up your editor, not going to open up Visual Studio. So you want to be able to distinguish that. This is going to be your source file to be submitted to code grade, but this is going to be your file you're going to be using to open up your project. Now again, another thing just to help you out. Let's say by accident you click on this spot right here, and it closes your project. Now what do? Well, all you have to do is just go to your right side and click on this arrow for source files, double click, and it will redisplay that, which I guess this could happen by accident. So if that happens, don't fear, just go to your source files, double click on main.cpp, and it will display that in your Visual Studio IDE. So anyway, now let's go ahead and talk about how to run a debugger on your code. And Debugger is a very nice tool to help you, essentially allows you to run your program step by step and be able to check your variable contents. But anyway, let's go ahead and now talk about debuggers. Okay, so the first thing you want to do with debuggers is you want to create a breakpoint. Now, breakpoint is a spot in your program that the debugger will stop on that line. So if you use your mouse, you can see this is this gray area. You see this circle appearing in different parts of your program or different lines of your program. So if you click on that line, it's going to create a breakpoint, which means that, so remember when you ran our code, it just runs everything top to bottom in very nice lightning speed, if you will. So we want to sort of tell the debugger that it will run different lines of code, but it will stop on line 10. So that way from line 10, we can pause our program. So I'm going to go ahead and just now click right there for our debugger. Now you want to go ahead and run our program in debug mode. So remember, this play button that's hollowed out, that's going to be just running it in sort of non-debug mode. This will run now in debug mode. Let's click on this and see what happens. So it ran the terminal, but the program stopped right here. Okay, cool. So for debugging, what you can do, I think there's a few options. You can click next statement, but actually I just always hit F10 to run our next statement. But I believe you can click on this as well, which will show next statement. So anyway, right now we can see here at the bottom of our console, it shows our variables. So you have 3 variables defined, and they all contain the value 0, and they are all of type double. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit F10 to run the next line of code. So F10, and you can see here it output this amount. Let's hit F10 again. It's going to it will now tell me to read in some inputs. I'm going to type in 1499 and hit enter. Now I ran that line of code and check this out. USD amount contains 14.99. So this is the value stored in that variable. So what a debugger can do is it allows you to run your program step by step. So you can sort of see the flow of execution of your program, and also you can see what's stored in your variable. So that way, it allows you to be able to just see what your program is doing, and when you're debugging your program, you have to be able to, as a programmer, see what's happening. So let's say if there's certain issues where maybe the variable is not set correctly, then this will give you an idea. So let's say if you maybe on paper you write out what your program is supposed to be doing. Let's say you do some test numbers and you see that, well, that's not a correct number. Why is it, so this can help you help fix your program. So let's say line 13 runs. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit F10. And our euro amount contains 13.994, but it has some really weird other round off errors as well, but it contains 13.94. So right here is where you can say, well, on paper, you can maybe compute, you can multiply 0.93, multiply it by 14.99, or using a calculator, and you can test it out and see that, wait a minute, if I say the euro amount is not matching your hand calculations, you can say, well, okay, maybe the program has some issue right there. So debugger allows you just to be able to do a snapshot and see what's stored in your variables and be able to see what line ran next. So as you progress in this course, you may have some if statements and looping structures, and this IDE can allow you to just see what line your program is running at different parts of your program. So you can kind of just really see what's going on. So that's what debugger really does. Let's go ahead and just keep running it. So F10 will allow you to run more lines of code. So now it ran line 14, so you can see the BP amount is now different as well. Hit F10 a few more times, and you can see that it output right there, and then you're done. And the program is now finished. Let's go ahead and do some more, playing around with some debuggers. So another thing you can do with debugging is when you have your breakpoint set up, run in debug mode. Let's try to use this. And see, I think this actually should also run at next line as well. Oh, this actually looks like it's just not doing it correctly. So yeah, so F10 for the win. So go with F10 to run your code line by line. I type in my amount 14.99. Go back to my edit or to my IDE. Hit F10 a few times. Let it run these 2 lines. Now, what you can do is at some point, let's say if you ran a few lines and you feel like, okay, it looks pretty good. You want to just run the rest of your code. You of course can hit F5. Or you can hit continue, which will just simply now, it will just run your code until the end. So debugging allows you to sort of run a few lines, but after you run a few lines, you feel like it's, running pretty well. F5 or just typing continue will just run the rest of the program, which I'll open up my terminal. On the bottom, on your taskbar, there should be a terminal looking symbol, and that's gonna show all of this. So let's go ahead and just do some more messing around with debuggers. So you can have more than one breakpoint. So let's say I want to have a breakpoint here, and a breakpoint, I can add a breakpoint over here as well. So what this really means is that, well, when I did F5 or hit continue on my debug mode, this continue is going to run the rest of your program, or it will run until the next breakpoint is reached. Let's go ahead and just test this out. So I'm going to go ahead and run this again in debug mode. Okay, I'm going to hit F10 to just run the next line of code. Hit F10 again, which will now expect me to type in input. Okay, cool. So I'm going to hit F10 again to see if my euro amount is correctly calculated. Looks like the amount is correct. So now we can do, let's say if we're running a few lines using F10 a few times, if we feel like, you know what, I think we're good now. I don't want to keep hitting F10. Let's say we had more lines of code. I want to keep hitting F10 again and again. What you can do now is you can hit continue or F5, and it's going to run until it hits the end of your program or until it hits the next breakpoint. So if I hit continue, it's going to just run until line 17 is reached. Let's see what happens. And you can see there, it jumped to line 17. So having more breakpoints means you can, of course, when it hits a breakpoint, you can hit F10 to run the preceding lines, line by line. You can, of course, hit F5 or continue to skip over and let the debugger just run those lines of code, and it will stop at the next breakpoint. So having breakpoints and then F10 and next breakpoint allows you to sort of run your program and stop it at certain spots so you can see where your program is currently running, what line is running currently, and you can also see what's in your variables, so you can just be able to kind of run this step by step slowly right in front of your eyes. You can see what's going on, and this is sort of designed to help you find your bugs. So Debugger doesn't really magically solve your problem, but it will help you with this. So of course, when you have if statements and loops, debugging is a very nice way you can just allow the loop to run step by step. But anyway, of course, I can have additional videos with this to maybe do some more advanced debugging at some point. But this video is just designed just to give you the very basics of Visual Studio. Hopefully this video did help you. So until next time.